maybe. Normally I'm a teacher, but sometimes I'm not. Sometimes I pot. So it's my little mobile wheel, which I can kind of bring to your house, or you can come to a party and learn how to make your own pots. I'm going to do a jug this evening, and I've got one that's just drying out up here, so hopefully it'll be dry enough to add a handle to in a minute. So first of all, I've balled up some clay. It's quite a big chunk, this actually. Just have to put it directly in the centre of my board. Give it a couple of slaps. And sorry, I realise that it's quite a quiet thing when I'm doing this because I really have to concentrate. It's really important when you're doing this to make sure that your clay is really wet so that it doesn't drag on your hands at all. And sorry, I've got to brace my legs on the table. The table's a bit wobbly. So I have to push it. This is what I'm doing now, is calling coning. I'm going to cone it up into a taller cone. This helps centre it and make sure that it's not going to kind of fly off the board later, or in fact get a kind of spiral in it. So you've got thicker sides and thinner sides. I'm glad I brought this wheel. It's nice and quiet. The other one I've got is some enormous, really noisy, clanky thing. So you think you've got it centred, and then you realise that actually there's a bit that's not quite centred. Now you have to use really small hand movements. Often people think that they've got to keep their hands on the wheel all the time, otherwise it's going to just go off. But actually I could leave it there all night like that and it'll be quite happy. Until it got really dry and lost contact with the board and then flew off. So, I'm just going to get it into a nice kind of dome shape to start with. I watched a blind potter do this on YouTube the other day. Well, in fact, when I started, and I thought, oh, that's ridiculous. And actually, so much of this is just about what you can feel rather than what you can see. That quite often when I'm doing it at home, I just shut my eyes and kind of you can feel where it is better. So that feels a lot more central now. So the next stage of making any pot really is to make a hole in the middle. So I'm just going to rest my fingers in the middle. And from this point on, it's all about being really slow. So now I'm going to make a hole in the middle. And I leave about 3/4 of an inch at the bottom, except in the jug I made the other day, which I forgot to, I got a bit carried away. I made a lovely jug which just had a hole that went right the way through. If anyone's got an idea, in fact, for what you can do with a jug that's just got a hole all the way through, it'd be great. So now I've got a pot of some kind, and I'm going to make it slightly wider, and then I'm going to bring it up. There are lots of different ways you can bring it wider. Some potters like to use both their thumbs and pull it out. Some like to just use one finger and pull it out. Some people like to put their finger under and kind of make an undercut and then pull that out. I'm going to pull the side out completely first. When I started, I was just using my fingers. I kind of learnt from YouTube videos, and I was just using my fingers, and I saw someone use a sponge and thought, oh, that's really going to be really complicated to kind of manoeuvre as well as having your fingers. But actually, once I've got used to it, it's actually a lot easier. I get a kind of a more even pressure. So I'm going to bring it up now, and I'm going to join my fingers so exactly opposite. Really slowly bring it up. You might be able to see from there's a bit of unevenness in one of the walls of this, one of the sides. Sometimes you can kind of pull that out, so you end up with a lump on the top, and you can then kind of pull the lump out of the sides. Sorry, it's been very quiet now. Got to really concentrate this bit. When the clay dries, it shrinks about 10%, and so you've got to kind of make your items just slightly bigger than you want them in the end. And if your clay is thinner in some places and fatter in some places, it will dry at different speeds. So the rim here, which is a bit thinner than this bit at the bottom, will dry quicker. So you've got to wait till it's really, really dry before you put them in the kiln. Otherwise they'll explode as they crack, as different bits dry at different speeds. I'm just going to bring it up a bit. All your kind of thickness is at the bottom to start off with, so you then have to bring it up high. It's going to be a really wide jug. So, what I'm going to do now is just cut the bottom off. These boards are really nice. I've got these boards. I didn't believe it. They're called Wonder boards. I thought, yeah, you're right. But they're amazing. In about half an hour, you can pull your ware off the board and don't have to kind of scrape it off with the other ones I've got, which is great. So later on, I'm going to be able to pull this off quite easily. I'm going to use my cheese wire and just take it off now. I don't know if you can see, there are kind of uneven bits around the top, bits of liquid clay that have kind of look all lumpy and bumpy, but after it's a bit drier, I can use a sponge just to kind of even those down, smooth those down. There's sometimes a point where there's no point in fiddling with it when it's wet, because you just make it worse. You can hear Gus, my 7-year-old, spends lots of time going, "Mummy, don't take it any further, stop there." And he's right, he's always right. So that's completely loosed from the bottom of the base now. Hopefully when I pull it off, I'll only have this tiny little kind of ridge of clay that will have stuck onto it. So it's great. If I want to make it a jug, if I want to leave it as a vase, I'll just leave it like that. If I want to make it a jug, then I have to. I normally look round and see if there's a better side. Sometimes there's a better side to have your lip. And then I put my fingers either side and just kind of pull. For ages I was thinking, how shall I make a jug lip? That's how you do it. So that's one that's dry. I'm just going to do another one now, and then I'll show you handle making. So my vicious tool. In fact, I'll show you handle making first. I didn't realise you were there. So I made this one about an hour and a bit ago, and it is a bit dry. It's not quite dry enough really for this, but we'll have a go. When you add two bits of clay together, you need to make sure that the bits that you're adding have got some cross-hatching on, just to make sure that they join really well. And now it's comedy maker handle time, which is wonderful. So I'm going to use a lump of clay, and first of all I have to squeeze it out into a long shape, and then I have to pull it down until it's the right shape and size. And it's quite tricky actually, because the clay sometimes has harder bits in it and softer bits in it, and you can't, you kind of have to work it the right way. So I'm trying to pull the stuff at the top down, and some potters like, to have, well, they've all got their own, preferences for shape of handle. I like quite a flat shaped handle. So I have to kind of move it around in my hand to make sure it's the right thickness all the way down. And then should have done this before. I've got to let this dry now. I've got to let it dry a bit, and then when it's dry I'll form it into the right shape and add it onto there. But I can't do that quite yet. It's going to be another half an hour before it's dry enough. So I'm going to let it drip dry. Actually, I can let it drip dry off the back of there probably. Save the village hall carpet. How long's that? That'll be okay. So I'll leave that on there and it'll dry out. And when it's the same hardness, same dryness as that, then I can add the two pieces together. Sometimes I have to put a little prop underneath to get the handle the right shape. after I've made a piece, then I have to let it dry for, it depends, this kind of weather it takes about a week to dry, but in the summer it could be ready, you know, in 36 hours. Then I put it in the kiln overnight for, well, yeah, for 12 hours, and then I leave it for another 12 hours without any heat. Then I take it out, and then I'll glaze it using, well, I've got different types of glazes. Some that I paint on, some that I dip. Then I put it back in the kiln again, slightly lower temperature, about 1,000 degrees, for another 12 hours. And then I leave it for a little bit longer, and then I bring it out and it's ready. So it's a kind of long process, and really annoyingly and kind of heartbreakingly sometimes, it can go wrong at any stage. You know, you can make one like this, and as you're making it, a lump will happen, or you'll get a spiral in it and it'll flop and it'll be gone. Or you can get to the end and you think this is wonderful, and as it's drying out on your shelf, you move it and you knock the handle off, and then you're, you know, stuffed. Or you put it in the kiln and the clay might have some inclusion in it, which means it explodes, or another pot might explode into your, you know, that one. And if it makes it out of the first firing, then when you do your glazing, sometimes the glazes don't work exactly as they have done last time. It might be to do with the temperature or the thickness of the glaze, or the clay you're using it on. So those are different types of clay, and they work differently on with different glazes. So you're never quite sure the piece you're making on the wheel is going to survive to the end of the process. And so when it does, it's quite, you know, it's quite an exciting moment. But opening up the kiln is just terrifying every time. You think, oh, please don't, please don't. Yeah, I do. You can come and learn. You can kind of come along to a party at my house, or I can come to you, and we do Prosecco and pottery evenings, 15 quid a head, and you can come along and learn, have a go, make a couple of pots on your wheel. I don't know if anyone's here who has been to this, had one last night. I also do children's parties, so you can have a go, you can have a go on this, or they can make other things out of clay, or decorate this like a, you know, pottery painting place. Yes, so there you go. I'll make another one now. Any questions? Anything you want to know?